Good evening. Welcome to Union Theological Seminary in the city of New York, and to this third in a year-long monthly series called Faith in America. I'm Mary Boyes. I'm the Dean of Academic Affairs here, and I bring you welcome on behalf of our President, Serene Jones, and all of my colleagues on the faculty. The series Faith in America focuses on significant national issues related to faith and social justice. Our goal is to animate and sustain public discussion on matters critical to the flourishing of our nation. Tonight we are very pleased to be discussing ways that older adults might constitute new human resources for justice work under the rubric of the aging of America, a new workforce for social justice. This is a vital topic for us at Union as we continue to recruit for our first cohort to join our Encore Transition Program, a new program Ruth Woodin has designed for individuals 55 years and older who are looking to transition to an encore career focused on social justice so that they might live out their values and faith in a new and powerful way. I'm honored to say a word of introduction about Ruth Woodin before she takes the stage to share more about the Encore Transition Program and introduce our speakers. Ruth brings a rich background to her leadership of Encore. She served for 7 years as president of Public Agenda, an opinion research and public engagement organization. She continues to serve on their board of directors. She also serves as chair of the board of Civic Ventures, which works to define the second half of adult life as a time of individual and social renewal. Ms. Woodin advocates for issues including obstacles to college completion, the need for less partisanship, new approaches to retirement, and the challenges and choices facing the American people as a result of the federal budget deficit and national debt. While many other details of her stellar career might be recognized, I am particularly proud and pleased to say that last May, Ruth began her own Encore transition by completing her Master of Theology degree here at Union. She has been a terrific presence among our students and a colleague, really, and friend to the people on the faculty. Please welcome our moderator, Ruth Woodin.
Thank you, Mary, and thanks to all of you for joining us for this event. Tonight we're going to explore the issue of the aging of America, an important trend, what many people call the longevity revolution, but which others describe maybe in more negative terms. But indeed, I believe that this is a trend that can dramatically transform our country into a time of both personal renewal and social renewal. And it is a profound issue for all people of faith, those who are deeply religious, those who are spiritually inclined, but in other ways than organized religion, and those who profess no particular religious commitment at all. But all people who are of good faith, who know that this issue goes to the heart of what makes us human. And it is directly related to the topic of faith in America, the name of this forum series here at Union Theological Seminary. And more importantly, it goes to the heart of this school's mission to make our world a place of greater social justice. Now, tonight's event is a unique collaboration between Union and the nonprofit organization Encore.org. And I am proud and very lucky to be affiliated with both of these institutions. I did indeed graduate from Union in May, and I've been a longtime board member of Encore.org. Now, I think all of you know the mission of Union Theological Seminary, but let me tell you briefly about the mission of Encore.org. It represents a movement of millions of people using their passion, skill, wisdom, and decades of experience to try to make a difference in their communities and in the world. As the purveyor of the idea of second acts for the greater good among people 50 plus, it seeks to be a vital new source of talent to benefit society. Very specifically, it is a vital source of a unique type of human resource talent. The talent that can only come from the touch of one caring human being to another human being in need. To address the social justice issues in our world that really can only be addressed by human interaction, not by computers, not by social media, not by policy, not even by advocacy or protest, and certainly not by presidential executive orders, but by one human being interacting on behalf of another. But how does Encore.org help the efforts of this new potential talent workforce contribute to improving the lives of people? Well, first, we tell a new story and we shine a light on and give voice to the many older adults already changing the world. And second, we look to create pathways so that more older adults can transition to having their own Encore experience with their own second acts for greater good. Third, we work on building innovative programs that demonstrate the profound effect that this workforce can have on social justice in America. So tonight we'll talk about all three of these approaches: new stories, new pathways, new innovative programs. And I hope at the end of the evening, you will be persuaded that the aging of America is not a problem to be feared, but a solution to be embraced. We are transitioning a zero-sum, gloomy prediction into a win-win strategy of immense proportions. As one of the founders of Encore.org, the estimable, I was sure I was going to not be able to say that word, estimable social entrepreneur John Gardner said, "What we have in front of us are breathtaking opportunities disguised as insoluble problems." The new model for the Encore stage of life combines elements of work, service, and social impact. It can be unpaid volunteer work or a source of continued income. Since 2011, 10,000 Americans a day are turning 65, the traditional age of retirement. We are going from 1 in 10 people over 65 years of age to 1 in 4 in the course of just a few decades. In 2030, less than 15 years from now, there will be more Americans over 65 than under 15. Thanks to the longevity revolution in medicine and well-being, we likely have 20 to 30 bonus years of active, healthy life, and not just added on at the end of life, but in that 50 to 80 years age span. Part of what used to be seen as old age, out to pasture, or worse, the greedy geezers. But that is a lot of time to be able to take on a whole new chapter of purposeful activity and to defy those negative notions. Encore exists to help define this new stage of life as an aspiration for personal growth, but maybe mostly to help transform our society, to bring alive the human touch workforce that is so badly needed today for a world of more social justice. So this is why the Encore ethos and the spirit of Union Theological Seminary are so uniquely intertwined. There's a windfall of human talent out there. People at the point in their lives thinking deeply about the values of legacy, generativity, and putting their faith in action, and looking to transition themselves to their own personal encore. But this is not an easy transition, and many people are looking for guidance in that process, and maybe even more importantly, they're looking for other like-minded people to share this journey with them. And that's what we'll be doing tonight. We have two terrific exemplars of the Encore spirit with us tonight to share their personal insights into this new stage of life and how it can put faith into action. Both of them have experienced their own transitions from one prominent career to something wholly different. And I'd like to ask both of them to come join me up here for our conversation, and I will introduce them to you. I think, is this on now? It is, yes, good. Whoa. Whoa. Whoa, get into this chair here. Whoa. Okay? Are we all planted? We're planted, okay. So, first, Ellen Goodman. She's a Pulitzer Prize winning columnist with a long-time syndicated column from the Boston Globe. But she found her way in 2011 to starting a whole new organization, from staffing it to finding office space to raising money for it, all those things that come with a new organization. Kind of terrifying, right?
Who knew?
Who knew, right? Lester Strong. Lester Strong was for 25 years the nightly news anchor at the NBC affiliate in Boston, who then decided to follow his commitment to meditation practice and became the president of the Siddha Foundation for 5 years. Then he transitioned again to working for two nonprofits focused on transforming the school experience for disadvantaged kids. And most recently, he has been the CEO of AARP Experience Corps, which you're going to hear a lot about. And I want to ask them first to give a snapshot of your personal experience of going through this transition. What did it feel like after years of doing something else? I'm going to ask Ellen to start and then just hand it off to Lester.
Well, I'm still a recovering journalist. And when I first began thinking about what I wanted to do next, it was at a time when I began, interestingly, meeting with a group of women in a group we called a Next Step group, and we sat around the first several meetings, and we were all women whose obits had already been written. So, in other words, if I died today, tomorrow the paper would say Ellen Goodman, Pulitzer Prize winning columnist, died today, although hopefully tomorrow. And so it was kind of like the checklist. I'd done a lot of that, and I was beginning to think about what next. I had written, I counted up with my daughter today, over 4,000 columns. And I was trying to think about what it was that I wanted to do next, and I actually wrote my last column. It was called Letting Myself Go. Now, the expression, letting yourself go, is something that really isn't flattering about women. It conjures up all kinds of terrible images that we don't have to go through. But for me, it was, where do you go when you let yourself go? And at that time, I was also struggling with a different transition, which is I'd gone from being a working mother to being a working daughter. And I had gone through the long, slow decline of my mother's life. And after she died, I realized how difficult that had been for me. I'd been faced with a cascading number of decisions because she had dementia. And she couldn't say what she wanted for lunch, let alone what she wanted for health care. And I felt very strongly that I'd wished I had heard her voice in my ear when the questions came up. And I met with a group of people, and we said, good Lord, we all had a story. We all had a story. As a journalist, I've never seen anything quite like it, because whenever I tell people now what I am doing, there's kind of like half a beat, and then out comes a story. And it's a story of a good death or a hard death. And these are stories that had never been shared. And by the way, I had spent my journalism career really covering social change, and my life being part of it. We're a generation of social change agents, and then we were faced with this other social change, the longevity revolution. So I began to meet with people, and we said, look, we could make this better. People are not dying in the way that they would choose, and one of the differences between a good death and a hard death was whether people had talked about how they wanted to live at the end of their lives, the care they wanted, the care they didn't want, whether they'd shared that with the people they loved. And that was the concept behind the Conversation Project. Now, just briefly, I assure you, I didn't know what I was taking on. I went from a career where you basically put a bell jar over your head, you work by yourself, you think, you know, if anybody ever wanted to shadow a columnist, it would be the most boring job in the world, because you basically think and write. And now I had to go through the business of starting an organization and knowing my own vast limitations. As we say in Boston, there's a wonderful Boston expression about somebody: he couldn't run a one-car funeral. That's me. I'm not a manager. So I recognizing your own strengths, which is one of the strengths of age, to actually know your strengths and weaknesses, creating and pulling together a team, and then, as Ruth said, raising money. Raising money is a journalistic no-no. You don't ask people for money. It's a real no-no. And so getting that together and creating a whole skill set. I'm happy to talk more about this, but I want to go to Lester.
Oh, wow. I think what I'll do is share with you kind of where it launched and how it has continued. And what do I mean by that? The first shift was from television to the Yoga and Meditation Foundation. And then from there, it was to a youth development program, and then to Experience Corps, where I am now. And I think that what was happening for me was that I was more curious and excited than I was afraid. In other words, it was this incredible, I stole that from Ellen Gilbert, who said that, I think it was in Eat, Pray, Love. But I really was. I was excited and curious about where opportunities could lead me. And I think really the real area of concern and question was really about how it was going to affect my family. With 3 children and a wife we were all living very comfortably in west of Boston, in the suburbs, and it was really a significant life change, would be, for all of them. And happily and gratefully, they said, "Dad, go for it." So Dad went for it. And it was extraordinary, first in terms of shepherding the work in the Siddha Foundation, which is an international yoga and meditation foundation. So it gave me an opportunity to travel all over the world and to be connected to something that I was personally passionate about, which is meditation, which I've been doing for a very long time. So that was really wonderful, and it was really the kickstart that then moved me into the other phases of my life. And when I left the foundation, I thought very carefully about what did I want to do. And when I understood and saw that there were children who really had extraordinary potential, but really weren't realizing that potential, I felt that that was a place where I could make a contribution. My personal story is that when I was in the 3rd grade, I was told that I was unteachable. I was mentally retarded, and that my parents shouldn't waste any time, effort, and energy in any kind of intellectual pursuit for me. And fortunately for me, there were 3 older adults, a barber, a minister, and the mother of a friend of mine, who said, "Yes, you're a little incorrigible, but there's nothing wrong with your mind." And literally from the 3rd grade through high school, they would check my homework and read my report cards, and probably more important than anything, would tell me that they believed in me. So I graduated 2nd in my class, lots of scholarship offers, including one to Columbia, right down the road. And life began to take off in an extraordinary way. And yet I understood that had it not been for those three individuals, those older adults, my life trajectory would have been dramatically different. So it didn't take much for me to get Experience Corps, to understand and appreciate what the potential and the possibilities were for really transforming the lives of children and older adults, by the way, in this extraordinary experience called Experience Corps. So we'll talk more about that.
We're going to talk about Experience Corps. I think what the story both of you told is probably resonant with at least some of you in this audience, the feelings and the hesitations and the opportunity and also the things that frighten you. Ellen, I'm going to ask you to talk about the Conversation Project, and it didn't take you long in the work there to recognize the role that the faith community could play in this. And I just want you to talk about what you've done in Boston and what the learning was when you engaged with the faith community in Boston that might be of great interest to people here in New York City.
Well, the Conversation Project is a public engagement campaign to see that everyone's wishes for end-of-life care are expressed and respected. So they put people at the center. And you have to remember that we started the Conversation Project right when death panels hit. Great timing. And every member of Congress sort of dove under the table. They thought that doctors having these conversations was the equivalent of a death panel. We were suggesting that the first thing that needed to be done was that people sit at the kitchen table with the people that they loved to talk about their wishes before there was a crisis. So that was what we did at first, and those were the tools that we created. We created a conversation starter kit, and then a how to talk to your doctor kit, subtitled because your doctor isn't going to talk to you. And then we created a kit for children who had terminal, who were in serious illness, and then we just sent one out this spring, a conversation starter kit for families of people with Alzheimer's and other dementias. We can talk about that another time. But in the process, we had tools, and we developed a field project to bring the Conversation Project to people where they lived, where they worked, and where they prayed. Now, why pray? You might ask. Or you probably wouldn't ask, but I assure you there are a lot of people who did. Well, the first thing was that the faith community, we realized, was an organic community, or organic series of communities that stretched across the country, that had people who were already there, connected with each other, and were a kind of family. The second thing we realized, of course, was that people go to their spiritual leaders at critical times in their lives. Birth, death, all the rituals of life were often under the auspices of their faith, and yet they didn't have these conversations in their faith communities. And it turns out that faith leaders had no more training in having these conversations than doctors. Two groups that, by any rational thought, should be on the front lines. So what could we do to engage the faith communities? Because, by the way, faith communities were also our best access to underserved communities. As we know, for all kinds of historic and proper reasons, the African American community was very suspicious of the medical community, and whether having these conversations was a kind of subtext for denying care. And we were saying, no, what we're saying is whatever your wishes are, we don't care what they are, that's for you. We want you to be heard and respected. And so reaching out, particularly for us, to the African American community was critical, because the African American community is traditionally far fewer advanced care directives and so forth, but also all these other communities. So we decided to test it by having our first, group come to a meeting for us, and we got together 26 faith leaders in the Boston area that we like to say went from Baptist to Buddhist. Although, in fact, in the first group, there were Baptist, in the second group, there were. So the alliteration still works. And they came to the first meeting.
Always a writer.
They came to the first meeting, and there was a real diverse faith group. And at the end of the meeting, a clergyman from the Jain community came up and said, you know, we all may disagree about what happens in the afterlife, but we all agree about how you should be heard about your wishes for the end of life. And so we started that way, and then we managed to get Rosemary Lloyd, who's here. Rosemary, there you are, I'm sorry. We managed to hook Rosemary Lloyd, who's a former UU minister, so this is her encore career too, to come and help us pull together what we call Conversation Sabbath. Again, we tested it in Boston, and we called it Conversation Sabbath because it goes across all the faith groups. And we had to teach and preach across Greater Boston. We had 40 communities come, and they had, and we also helped them. We have a whole series of tools for faith leaders to help them with everything from preaching to having meetings that share with the community. So this has been, and then for the second year, which we just completed, we have reached way beyond the Boston community, and again have engaged really a huge diverse number of faith communities. So we still regard this as a great beginning nut. We've had some terrific feedback. We had, which probably we can get Rosemary to tell you about later too, from different faith leaders and in their relationship with the medical community. So that's been, it's by no means complete. We would like to reach out into the heartland and into evangelical communities, so whatever connections that you all have would be very welcome for us to some of the larger ones, because this is something that, just as a small example of how universal this is, we did a survey 2 years ago that showed that 90% of Americans think it's important to have these conversations. Now, 90% of Americans do not agree on anything. They don't agree on the national anthem, right? But they agree that these are important, and yet only 30% of people are having these conversations. So we have a long way to go, but we have indeed beaten back the death panels, and we are really partnering in a wonderfully spiritual and community way with the faith community.
You mentioned the issue of training, I wanted to make note that Sue Pack was able to work with Rosemary Lloyd here today to do some training right here at Union, and we'll be doing some more tomorrow, and we're really grateful for that, Rosemary. Thank you so much. I hope there are people here who can see how this could be a factor in New York City, and if you're at all interested in that, please let me know that, because we're working to create the same kind of Conversation Sabbath opportunity here in New York City. I want to turn to Lester, and also on the topic of faith and your faith journey. When I was planning this program, I sat with Lester, and he told me something about him that I didn't know. I mean, there are a few things I don't know about you, but one of them was he said that he was he's a graduate of Davison College in North Carolina, and he said, we have an alum there. And he said that when he was getting ready to graduate, thinking about what he was going to do, he was seriously ready to come to Union Theological Seminary, but then he got seduced by the television industry. And I can say that because I worked in advertising for 40 years, so it is a seductive business. But you were on a different faith journey, and so I want to ask you to talk about that and actually where your faith journey is taking you now.
Well, first I did go to seminary.
Yeah.
I ultimately did go to one in Atlanta.
Okay.
But then I got the TV call and I came back to New York. But my faith journey, interestingly enough, has been always, really from a really young child. I had this very strong sense that the spiritual journey and supporting people in their own personal spiritual journey was really kind of what was right for me and what was important for me. And I've kind of danced around it and moved from it and to it and back from it, but it's always been there. And it's really kind of manifested itself in the last 30 or 40 years, really in my own personal practice. I've been a long-time meditator for about 30, 35 years, almost 40 years. And through that experience, it really then informs and really influences how I engage with other people. I think some of the happiest, most inspirational times of my life have been when I'm meditating or when I am studying theology or Eastern philosophy, which I'm very steeped in. It really is quite powerful for me. So I'm about to launch into a new encore career in that I will be going to Kripalu. Some of you might know about Kripalu in Stockbridge, Massachusetts. It's a yoga and health center. And I will be essentially, Betsy, where are you? Their outreach person, really trying to tell the story of Kripalu. And what's exciting about that is that Kripalu has been working for the past 10 years with Harvard Medical School and with Brigham and Women's Hospital to really quantify what are the real benefits of the practices themselves. You know, endorphin levels and corticosteroid levels and all that sort of thing. So in a very tangible way are able to demonstrate what are the benefits, not only what we're feeling, but literally biochemically what's happening to us. So to be a part of that is just really exciting for me, very exciting for me. There's a term, a Sanskrit term, which many of you may know called dharma, which means right action or duty. But it really has a bigger kind of connotation, and that is to do what you know you are well suited to do, and not running from it, but literally stepping into it. And I feel that this movement toward mindfulness and yogic practices and healthy living really is core to who I am, and to be able to do that, to offer what I love with love to other people is just a really exciting thing for me.
I rather suspect there will be some encore-like new programs at Kripalu. Am I right?
We'll see. I think you're probably right.
Okay. Ellen, I want to ask you a question about why you think that changing the conversation is such an important thing to happen today and now in our cultural life. I know it's an important personal one, but you and I have had conversations that it's much needed in our country, not just for older adults, but for all generations. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, I think some of it is, you know, it's interesting, we don't have that many intergenerational conversations, period. And we're talking about it at Encore in a gen-to-gen program that we have launched about generation to generation, about, as Ruth suggested, turning the narrative, the central narrative about aged people as being the problem into a narrative saying we can be the problem solvers, that we have the time and the energy and the know-how to reach and think about how do we help the younger generation, that we are not really we're not the people who are, there's not a generational war, there's a generational connection that we need to think about. And in the work of the Conversation Project, it's almost in the other direction, too. That we're saying, we need to connect across adult children talking to their elderly parents, and elderly parents talking in a real way to their adult children. We need also to just have these conversations about something that's quite profound, that we have denied or not thought about. There's been a real taboo about talking about end of life, as there was a taboo about talking about cancer, you know. And all of that, the work that my generation did, you know, just in terms of speaking out, and in terms of what we think of as a double helix of social change, that you bring change from the outside, from people, to change the institutions. You don't sit around and wait for the institutions to change. That's what we learned. My generation learned that when we changed how people give birth in America, that it wasn't the doctors who said, you know, please come in and put your feet, you know, take your feet out of the stirrups, bring your husbands in, let's have a baby in a bathtub, let's take it, you know, bring the video camera in. It wasn't doctors, I assure you, who said that. It was people. So we need to get people at the center of these conversations in so many ways, and one of the ones that 100% of us are going to experience is death. If you get that right, you get something big right for yourself and for your survivors, for yourself as a survivor and for your own survivors in time. And if you get that wrong, you get something big wrong. But we've seen that too, we've seen that, you know, one of the interesting things is when we talk and we do a lot of media stuff, we spent a lot of time talking to my colleagues in media, and there will be, again, this incredible pause, and then somebody will tell me a story, often on the air, and it will be a story about a loss that they experienced. Sometimes it's 20 or 30 years ago, that still lives with them and haunts them or restores them. And that is really powerful. And that suggests the power of these conversations.
When Ellen started the Conversation Project, I was lucky enough to be asked to be one of her advisors, and I remember you asked.
She was abused into being an advisor. We needed her.
No, but you know, it gave me a chance to tell my story, and it was the story of my mother's death. My mother died 5 years ago, and we did have a conversation. I wish we'd had a longer one and a deeper one, but we had enough of a conversation where my mother said to me, I am not going back to the hospital. I'm not going back to the hospital. You got to promise me that. So we did, and I made arrangements with hospice, and what that helped me to do was to talk to my siblings, and we agreed, they live all over the country, that when the moment came, they would all come, and we would help my mom die. And we would all crash in my apartment in New York City, sleeping on every source we had, including a chaise lounge in my mother's room, so that somebody could always be there with mom. And for a week, we were there and helped my mother die. And to this day, I think of that as her last great gift to us, that we were there with her at the end. And it reminds me of how important these conversations are, because I was restored by that. I could tell that story at her funeral. I could feel the kinship with my siblings. To this day, we're all closer than we were before that week. So I too join you in knowing that this is not just about what's right for older adults and what they want at the end of life. It's maybe more so for the people left behind in many ways, so that we don't have that regret. I'm going to turn to Lester now to talk about Experience Corps, because this is the kind of quintessential intergenerational program, and it was started by Encore.org as one of these demonstrations of an important innovative program. We started it in a few cities, and now under the aegis of AARP, we started in, I think, 5 cities. It's what, in 24?
We're in 22 cities and 30,000 kids.
30, yeah. So this program has grown, but it was started intentionally with the idea of recruiting older adults to be trained to tutor students for a year in their school, students who were in 1st to 3rd grade, and to make sure that they would get up to the reading level of 3rd grade. That's an important milestone in elementary education. So that was the goal. And I'd like you to talk about the whole experience core experience and why the intergenerational aspect was so crucial. Because there's lots of different kind of mentoring programs, but this was designed to use older adults. And it's been evaluated. So tell me, does it work?
Yes. And I think we have to go all the way back to John Gardner. I mean, it was his brilliance that
He
really...
named it, actually.
Yes.
He actually had registered the name without knowing what he was going to use it for.
The extraordinary piece of that was that he recognized kind of the confluence of 2 trends. The trend of us, the older adults and the boomer generation, moving through the demographic pipeline. And he knew not only that we were getting older, but that the boomers are the oldest, healthiest, and best educated cohort in American history. And he wanted to figure out a way to really recapture that intelligence, that energy, and really direct it toward critical issues and problems facing our country. And then on the other side, we saw this growing achievement gap that was happening among our poor and children of color across the country. And it was his brilliance that really said, if we got these older adults to sit down with these children, boy, what a transformational opportunity it would be. And then he worked with, of course, Mark Friedman, and put together the initial plan that was in a small group of cities, and it has grown. And I think that more than simply having tutored, hundreds of thousands of children over these past 21 years, it's done a lot of other things too. Number one, it has really cemented how important it is to cultivate this cross or this intergenerational relationship. Mark is often fond of saying it's almost a genetic imperative. We as older adults recognize toward the end of our lives that we want to give back and that we want to leave a legacy or live a legacy that really will stand the test of time. On the other side, we have young people who really are looking to be affirmed and looking to be and are human sponges, or just absorbing everything that there is, so that bringing these 2 generations together has just been extraordinarily powerful. So much so that the research that has been done by Johns Hopkins and Washington University demonstrates that our children are getting much greater, 60% greater proficiency in some of the fundamental skills of reading in ways that children in the same school would not be getting them. So again, it's that support, it's that nurturing, it's that structure that really allows this wonderful dynamic to really happen. And then on the other side, what we see is what happens to the older adults who participate. Again, we find that they're more mentally acute, more physically fit, greater networks, a greater sense of purpose and meaning in their lives is there for them. And we have our members who are coming back again, and our retention rate is like 80 to 85%. I mean, they just simply cannot get enough of the experience because it's so gratifying. Johns Hopkins just did another study about a little over a year ago, where they did brain scans of some of our volunteers in Baltimore. And they found that the underlying causes of Alzheimer's disease and dementia were not only slowed, but in some of them, it was actually reversed because of the kind of engagement that our older adults were having with these children. So again, there's just this extraordinary win-win experience, both for the child and for the older adult, that I think is still not being well measured, because there's so many dimensions to it that are so beneficial for so many. So our goal is to get this wonderful vaccine to as many older adults and to as many children as we can. And I'll say one other thing, because I think it cuts across what both of us are saying, and that is, someone said to me, was the equity of agency. In other words, giving, whether it is a family whose loved one is about to pass away, or a child who really wants to be able to control their ability to learn and to explore. That equity, that opportunity is really what we're talking about here. For Experience Corps, we say it by saying, we hold our children's dreams until they're able to hold them for themselves. And that's what Experience Corps is all about. It's much more than about, the 5 components of reading. It's about saying, you have this extraordinary capacity, and all we want to do is to unleash that capacity within you so that you can be the best you that you can be, and to explore to the limits of your interest and your ability. And that's what really, for me, is such an exciting part of what we do.
I'm going to take a pivot. We're going to take some questions and engage the audience in a moment, but I'd like to share something important with you, and it's really related to the experience that those of us who are lucky enough to work with Encore.org have had based on our history with Experience Corps. For many, I was involved with Encore.org in the very beginning when we first put together Experience Corps, and over the years, we saw how this thing developed, and we were kind of muttering all the time, shouldn't we go big on this idea? I mean, shouldn't we make a really big bet on this intergenerational approach? Because, as Lester said, there's evidence that this may actually be a better, more proven source of impact on really transforming kids' lives than other social service interventions that are aimed at helping vulnerable kids. And after a fair amount of talking and the good providence of some funders, Encore.org is absolutely doing that themselves right now. 3 weeks ago, we launched a new program called Generation to Generation. This is a major 5-year effort to recruit at least 1 million adults to stand up and go to work for kids. We have recruited any number of youth-serving organizations who have agreed to intentionally and actively, and I mean actively, reach out for older adults to bring into their youth-serving organizations, to bring them in as full-time workers, part-time workers, stipended workers, or volunteers, but all in the effort of making that big bet on behalf of kids. You're going to meet during the reception, I hope, some of the staff from Encore.org. They're here. I'm going to ask them to raise their hands. They've got nice little white name tags. They're not neon, but they're white. So when you get a chance at the reception, I want you to introduce yourself. We are on the move to recruit even more organizations, national organizations, local organizations, so that when an older adult wants to stand up for kids and he's all dressed up and ready to go, there'll be a home for them to share that passion for kids. So we're really proud of Generation to Generation, and we know, based on the experience we've had in the past, that this is going to be a transformative opportunity for older adults to change the lives of young kids. It's already generated a lot of interest. There have been major stories in the Wall Street Journal, Forbes, AARP magazine, and the Washington Post. So keep your eyes out. You're going to hear about Generation to Generation. We also have information at your seat about Encore.org, so you can find your own way to become part of this movement, and I hope you will have any questions or share that interest when you meet the friends from Encore when we have wine and cheese afterwards. I think we're just right on schedule to begin to take questions, dialogue, conversation. We have mics. Don't be intimidated by mics. I hate them myself. but I hope you'll feel free to ask questions of Ellen or Lester. Usually somebody, when we have these conversations, says, okay, now what do I do? How do I do this? But I'm going to let you ask that question. So, someone please. Where's Rob? Rob Battles. You would be likely to have a question. Do you mind?
So, how do we get involved? I know that's the standard question,
Yep.
but I think, I've been thinking about this. And,
That's why I called on you, Rob.
yeah, I knew there was some reason. You're used to making a decision, finding the opportunity, and because you've done it, and numbers of times. I think a lot of people in my position are looking for an opportunity, but there's a reluctance to admit, I don't know what I'm doing, and how do I begin? I mean, one of the thoughts I was having, since I come from a marketing background, is, I could imagine designing campaigns that would create a funnel for interested people who are, maybe they're interested, maybe they're not, but I think a conversation, really what you said at the beginning, a conversation person to person with someone who's just a little ahead down the road,
Right.
who knows somebody else who's just a little ahead down the road. So it's like, okay, so there's some paths here that someone who knows very little about what I want to do and how to do it, I've got somebody who's ahead of me on here who can walk out. So where do we find those?
Like-minded people?
Yeah.
Yes, well, Mary talked about the program. Thank you, Marcy. Mike. We are starting a program to connect like-minded people to have these conversations. We're going to start this program right here at Union Theological Seminary. It's been a dream of mine ever since I started my program here. There's a few programs like this at community colleges around the country. There's one at another seminary, the Pacific School of Religion, and we've been in touch. There's one here at Pace University. There are programs to bring people in this same stage of life together, sort of self-dialogue, and to hear from people who've been on a journey. I hope if this is of interest to you, you would consider the program here at Union. It's going to start in January. It's going to run concurrent with the semester here at Union. You would be going to Union as a student, but without the grades, and you'd be, cavorting in the halls with Union students. Most of them are younger, but not all of them. I wasn't the oldest one in my class here at Union, I should tell you that. When I was coming here, I used to tell my friends that it felt like I was going to Hogwarts because it was so beautiful and so historic and so spiritual. And it rejuvenated me. It became my personal Encore home. When I would get a lot of calls from people, say somebody like you, Rob, when they discovered I was on the board of Encore and they knew that Encore was in the business of redefining this stage of life. So they would call me and say, can I talk to you about my plan? And I felt like I should hang out a shingle sometimes because it was basically people fumbling around on their own, feeling very insecure. That's how I felt. I get it. I know this. But there are, I have a reading list I recommend to people. And the first one I recommend is a book called Transitions by William Bridges. I think I've already recommended it to you, Rob. And Suzanne Braun-Levine is here, and she authored Inventing the Rest of Our Life. And that's another, particularly for women, but anyone could read Suzanne's book. There are some people who've been writing about this really well. One of the things that I learned about in the Transitions book was that you go through stages as you think about this. It's not unlike the stages of grief, because you have to kind of grieve the life you're going to leave and get ready for another life. And William Bridges, who wrote Transitions, says that you go into what he calls the neutral zone. Suzanne has a much better term, which is the fertile void. And I think you picked it up. There was some psychiatrist who used that term or something. But you go into this stage where you try things on and you let things go and you play a little bit. But one of the things that Bridges said was to pay attention to those little flashes of images and to pay attention to your dreams. I thought, okay. But I kept getting this image of me sitting in a room in a circle. And it wasn't anything I wasn't really familiar with that concept, but I kept seeing myself in essentially being in a class, which is very different than what I did professionally. I was usually the moderator or the speaker or a panelist, but what a concept to be sitting in a classroom. And that actually was the germ of the idea for me to come here to Union. Why I came to Union and as opposed to Columbia, that's a whole other story. But I'm very, very glad I didn't go to Columbia. No offense to Columbia, but I'm really glad I came here. But that was an interesting piece of advice, that your head is in a different place when you're thinking like this. And images come that you don't know where they come from. I'll let Lester and Ellen weigh in on this too, because...
Well, I just want to respond to a couple of things, because first of all, you may see the transition that Lester and I have made as people who knew what they were doing. Wrong, you know. I didn't know what I was getting into. I had no idea what I was getting into. I thought this was an idea that somebody should do, you know. Somebody else should do. And the skills that I had as a journalist were not transferred into these skills, into the skills that you need, and that I had no idea, some of which I had and some of which I didn't have, but I had no idea that I had some of these. So you're going blind. And I would offer a third term for what Suzanne had talked about, which is you need a gap year. I mean, we all have a gap year before you get into college. You probably need a gap year as you're thinking about going into your next kind of career, too. And you already have identified yourself as an enormously valuable person that you know about marketing. Do you know how many nonprofits there are out there who are desperate for somebody who can help them with this world of marketing? So you don't even know your own value. So some of it is just taking that gap year and beginning to talk to people. Now that might have been easier, you know, Lester and I both coming out of journalism, we're used to asking the stupid question, which is what you do as a journalist. You know, you ask the stupid question because that's your job. And you keep calling people and asking them stuff, and gradually you get people together, and that's part of what the journey to the next step is.
I think it's been covered. I think that in a concrete way, I think that when you talk with the folks from Encore, talk about the Encore Fellows Program, which is extraordinary, which is folks all across the country who have really gone through the very process that we're discussing right now. Right. And that Encore has found a way to give them kind of a process to really explore what's possible. So it's already there. And, you know, so I think that that's a great starting place. And Marcy's great book about, making transitions is also available. So there are a number of resources that are actually in place already that I think could serve us all pretty well.
Yeah, Marcy wrote a book called The Encore Career Handbook, which is really nuts and bolts about making the transition. It's going to be a text in my Encore Transition program. Marcy's going to be a guest speaker. So we're going to do some very nuts and bolts training as well. The Encore Fellows program is here in New York, so you might want to mention this to one of the Encore staff people, where people come to become a fellow and work for a year for a nonprofit organization here in New York City. There's a kind of match that goes on. It's a stipended year, usually paid for by a foundation or the nonprofit itself that brings the person in. Has a very high retention rate of people staying either in that organization or another nonprofit. And is there anything I'm not saying about the Encore Fellows program here in New York? Okay. It's a year-long program, and people love doing it. And one of the things that's interesting to me, I held a party for the graduating class one year at Christmas in my apartment, and I was talking to the nonprofit leaders where these Encore Fellows had gone to work. And some of them came in, some of them, came out of marketing. Some of them came out of law, some of them came out of real estate, and they found some interesting way to work in the organization. But the interesting thing that all these nonprofit leaders told me, that no matter what their job was, they found that the Encore Fellows became really important advisors to them, the leaders of the organization, about human resources. That's a skill that if you've worked anywhere in any capacity for that many years, you get really knowledgeable about working with people, hiring people, firing people, and that the human resource advice was crucial no matter what their job was. So that does exist here in New York. I think it's in 19 cities now, maybe more, 13.
I would just add this is an interesting moment for, the expression faith in America can be read two ways.
Oh.
Do we have faith in America? And that there are going to be a lot of people who are searching for, in a moment of, for many of us, profound disappointment and turning away from the belief that the government's going to do anything to help people, who are looking for something to do that's purposeful, that's meaningful, and that can help in ways that we're despondent, while the public policy will help. So I think it's going to be a very interesting moment for an awful lot of people who are thinking through, what can I do to make a difference in the face of this political moment?
Any other questions? Someone's getting up. Brave soul. Oh, several. Yes, please.
So, good night. How are you? My name is Andrea Lawrence, and I'm a director at a nonprofit organization of Muzzy. We do intergenerational digital literacy
Good
programming.
For you.
So
wow.
I'm super excited about what's going on here tonight. I traveled all the way from the land of Brooklyn.
You're not the only
one. And so my question is really two-part. And in listening to you, I think the last statement you made kind of clarified something for me. So I heard you say you were interested in partnering with organizations that have young people.
That serve youth.
That serve youth.
Right.
And so then my question then would be, the Encore participant, would that person be someone who would be in a project with that young person? Or, do we get to define the roles, or how does that work?
Well, that's a really good question. The organizations that we have been recruiting mm-hmm. for the Generation to Generation campaign and program have been really, for free to design how they would use older adults. But what we want them to do is to have an intentional strategy to recruit them. So they could be in the program area, but they could be in the back office.
Got it.
They could be a bus driver. They could be a therapist. I mean, they whatever the skills are that older adult brings to the organization would be deployed in the way the organization could best use them. Does that?
Yeah, no, so I'm standing here, but I'm really bouncing off the walls. I'm super excited because just like lately, our latest initiative is to connect 2 million, like to connect 1 million older adults with 1 million youth. So I'm sitting there like, oh my God, that's it.
Okay, Betsy,
Well, if
you'll find this.
If you
Betsy
take
will
a
find
whole
you.
million, we're going to have to raise the numbers. Huh?
You're gonna change the status and the statistics.
So like, I just want to know, like, hi everyone, hi. So I just, like, who are you in the room that, I need to speak with? And all right, awesome. All right, so thank you for that. I know I have a few other questions
and
I'll ask you later.
Okay, and keep up the good work.
Thank you, and you.
Yes,
Yeah.
please. Okay, I saw, yes. Thank you. That's really great, thank you.
My name is David Lawrence. I won't be in your Tuesday program because it's Tuesday nights, and that's the night I mentor an EFM group, so I can't do it this time around. But
good for you. You have a good reason to be.
Something that's going on here, up at the front, is that you're talking about your experiences in a way that I'm identifying with my children, who are millennials, and so our daughter is a television producer, and she's pivoting now and applying to law schools. And our son just got married, his wife got moved to Detroit, and he's moving from a nonprofit he's working for in Tarrytown and going back to school in jazz education. So, but it's striking me that what that all has in common is the ability to embrace uncertainty. And that sounds like a cliche, but as we get older, it gets really harder and harder to do that. So now, my two questions. In the curriculum you've got planned, how do you help people learn how to do that? And then is there an opportunity to bring that in a smaller frame out, maybe back through churches, in a way that gets people ready to be recruited? Because I suspect there are many people who would never be recruited because there's some gap between where they are now in terms of ability to embrace uncertainty versus where they would have to be in order to say yes to something like this. It's really tempting to stay in the job you have because, especially in the current political environment, you just want to stay in the traces and keep going, right? It's very seductive to stay in the path you're on, where the next paycheck is known, right? And so how do you help people change their of reference so they can act more like the older people can start acting more like millennials?
Well, let me just speak to the curriculum question that you asked. Some of the reading I've been doing has been focused a lot on learning how to have endings and thinking about how we end things in our life. And actually, there's one of the books that I'm looking at is a book called Wise Aging by a rabbi from New York, Rachel Cowan. Somebody seems to know her. Yes. And Rachel has a number of exercises in her book that get at this question, making endings and thinking through living in ambiguity. One of the things in William Bridges' book is he tells us that when you go into the neutral zone or the fertile void, the temptation is to go back where you were. And what he encourages you to do is to kind of stay the course in ambiguity. And he has some techniques for doing that we'll be talking about in class. Because, as he said, it's probably not going to be a good neutral zone if you don't make a mistake. And most people know more about what they don't want to do in this stage than what they do want to do. So you first kind of get through the stage of knowing what you don't want to do, and then take on the fearful things. There are some very practical matters, though. This is not very practical matters about income, health care, health experience that people have to face. And we're going to use the program that I've designed is the program I wish I had had. So it might not be right for everyone. It's different than the other programs I know of, which tend to be intensive 4-day like retreats. I'm seeing this more as a course, because I believe this transition takes some time, and it needs to percolate a little, and it needs to have a lot of dialogue with other people struggling with it. And I think the experience of people doing this together builds some courage. It's not unlike any other support group, a 12-step group, or what health support groups, where you find out you're not alone. You think you are, and there's a lot of things generated by that. I don't have an easy answer. I do know that there is some dialogue work. I'm trained as a dialogue coach, honest to God. I used to do this in Congress, if you can believe. I mean, I used to dialogue coach congressional staff. Look how well that's going. Ruth. Yeah, they get along so well. They don't even ride the same elevator anymore, I'm told. The Republican staffers and the Democratic staffers, they ride different elevators, so I'm told. But, my hope is that the program is a combination of discursion and dialogue and reading, and then experiential experience or practice. So we hope, with the help of the field education people here, to match each participant with a chance to shadow people working in the field that they're thinking about doing. So we're going to try to blend that real life look with, I think what the union ethos is about, a really important discernment stage. I am counting on the group to sort of self-organize. I'm not teaching this class. I'm just a facilitator or a coach. And I think it'll depend very much on the people in the room. I think I have to adapt the program a little bit once I know who's in the room and where they are. So if you're interested in being part of an experiment and a cohort that's going to try to help develop these techniques that people could take to others, to their faith community, then I hope you'll go to the website, read more about the design, and take the link to the application. We're taking applications until the end of this month. The class starts January 31st, meets every other week, Tuesday evenings. As I said, it's concurrent with the spring semester here at Union. And I think it's going to be an amazing experience. Some of the faculty and administrators, Dean Boyes being one, Serene Jones, the president, being another, are going to sit in on each of the different sessions as a fellow traveler, not giving a lecture. So I want you to get to know Union as well, because I think if you're like me, you'll find a home here. So.
Amen.
Thank you.
Nothing as organized and as well conceived as what Ruth was talking about, but my experience has been small bets. Just little small bets, and often that's in the form of volunteering, doing something that you feel you have some interest in. You're trying it on, testing it, and if it has interest for you, then take another step and another step and another step. But there's no magic formula, but I think what is most important is that you move, lean forward. Lean in. You really have to consciously and very intentionally say, this is something that I really want to find that is really going to be satisfying and meaningful to me. And then, test and sample, until you find something that really does work for you, and then make a bigger and bigger and bigger investment into it.
You're so wise, Lester. Any other questions? Yes, please. Hello.
Hi. My name is Mason Jenkins. I'm a supervisor of pastoral care at a local hospital.
Excellent.
So one of the things that we do is we work with the community health department to try and educate the public about palliative care and about sort of making
Excellent.
our wishes known about the end of our lives. So a question I have for Ellen is that, we find recently that there is a sort of an upsurge in interest in this topic. Some of it...
Because of you, probably.
Yeah, I think so. And also from, I believe, One Days
Yes,
Book
yes,
Portal. It's
wonderful.
got a lot of interest in the public. But I would say that I'm curious in two regards. One is how do we get our doctors to also take a step forward in this direction? I think it's unfair a little bit to have the onus be entirely on the folks that are coming to their doctors to have this conversation. So if you know of any means to motivate that population. And also to get younger folks involved in the conversation too is something that we have not been able to do at all. Folks that are aging, that are coming into the medical system are more aware of this topic, but it's something that younger folks really, as you spoke about, can really benefit from with their families and, living life.
Right. Well, it's interesting. There was a study that was just released, I think it was last week, that was done by Cambia and by the Hartard Foundation, which is located here. And one thing it said that there were interesting connections in this survey between clinicians and people, or patients as they called them in the study. We call them people because we're always trying to say, wait a minute, and the doctors said that they were most comfortable having these conversations with people who were healthy, having early conversations. And the people, interestingly enough, said those conversations were least helpful. So there were many connections. Everybody thought that it was important, and you're right. There's been a real tipping point change. Both clinicians and people in this survey thought that it was very important to have these conversations, and by the way, very important to have these conversations early. And in the Conversation Project survey that we did, the biggest reason people said that they didn't have the conversations was it's too soon. And we always say it's always too soon until it's too late. So that we also believe these conversations should start very early. The truth is that the people most receptive to begin these conversations are middle-aged daughters, mostly, not entirely, but middle-aged women who are going through observing their elderly parents going through this. We agree that doctors should be much more amenable to this. They don't get any training in it, and they are uncomfortable in having these conversations. And the closer it gets to a medical crisis, interestingly, the least comfortable they are in having it. Doctors need to, and I would take each medical hospital, obviously they need to be trained in having these conversations. And the first step in being trained is they need to have these conversations themselves, because you can't do it with your patients until you've done it with yourself. And they need to have a conversation too early, which is about values, not about procedures. So the doctors and the clinicians have generally been pretty more comfortable having conversations about procedures. Do you want this procedure or not? And you look at the POLST forms and the MOLST forms, these end-of-life forms, and they're all about procedures. And dear Lord, there isn't a checklist long enough to cover every procedure you're going to run into. But what we have said is let's talk about values. what matters to you, not what's the matter with you, but what matters to you. How do you want to live your life toward the end of it? You know, where do you want to be? Do you want to be, what's your choice? Would you want to be at home or in a hospital? Are you a person who wants every bit of information or none? Do you want to make decisions for yourself, or would you rather the doctors do? And also the most important thing, which everybody should be encouraged to do, which is to pick a healthcare decision maker. If you can't make decisions for yourself, who will make them for you? And half of all the people over 65 cannot make decisions for themselves when they go into the hospital. It's a huge figure. The moment they go into a hospital, they can't make decisions for themselves. So we do have a new kit that's coming out called How to Choose a Healthcare Decision Maker and How to Be a Healthcare Decision Maker. It's very short, and again, it's kind of user-friendly. Because everything that we do is user-friendly. And it is my belief that the doctors have to pick up. They may be most comfortable having sort of what the people in that original survey described as transactional conversations. But what they wanted was humane, sensitive, you know, different kind of conversations. I happen to believe that the first place to do that really is with the people you love and who love you, because they are going to be making decisions for you when the time comes. But it's also important to have these conversations so that the doctors also put you at the center. And they listen to you. And they are much more comfortable if you already have these conversations. They say that in this same survey that I was quoting from. So there's what we call a double helix of social change. That a lot of the impetus for it comes from the outside. It touches institutions who again encourage it on the outside, and it goes on in my very rough, non-scientific version of a double helix of social change. But we have our part to do, and so do the clinicians of all kinds, and not just doctors. It might be that the social workers, the nurses, you know, any of these people are far know you better and are more present at that moment.
Thank you. Do we have a last question? Okay. So first of all, I want to thank you all for staying with us, and I hope you'll join us afterwards for some wine and cheese right set up in the back. I want to thank Ellen and Lester, two of my favorite people, and I think they deserve a more. I said at the beginning, I hope that by the end of the night you would see that the aging of America is not a problem to be feared, but an opportunity for this country and for all of us as individuals. This is an exciting time for Union with the launch of the Encore Transition Program. They're proud to be part of this moment. We hope that if that interests you, you'll come on the journey with us and consider taking the course. I want to thank you tonight. I want to welcome you into the world of the future of Encore. I hope you'll join us for the reception, and I want to wish all of you a happy holiday season. Thank you so much for being with us. Thank you very much. So.